And speaking of a green economic revolution, the carbon credits market is still a work in progress, but already has some interesting stories. CO2 Australia is the biggest provider of carbon sink tree plantings in the country, successfully commercialising carbon offsetting. And to tell us more, the company's CEO, Andrew Grant, joins me now in the studio. Andrew, thanks so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
Good to
Thank
chat
you.
with you. OK, there are plenty of us, me included, still trying to get our entire head around the whole carbon credit system.
Yes.
So explain to us exactly what it is that your company does.
What we do is build single-purpose carbon forests for the offsetting companies' greenhouse gas emissions. So a typical client would come to us and give us a greenhouse gas reduction target that they need. And then we would go out and create a carbon forest, for the reason of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And we would then manage and credit that project under a scheme and manage it for up to 50 years.
And you use mallee eucalypts,
Yes.
is that right? Why have you chosen that?
Well, Australia had a very large inland forest which we've cleared, so that creates a tremendous opportunity to revegetate that inland forest, and mallees have evolved in the Australian landscape. They're long-lived, they're low cost, they can handle climate variability, they bring a whole suite of other values for those degraded rural, marginal farming country, and they actually sequester quite a lot of carbon, and perhaps most critically there's a lot of data on their growth, so you can model with certainty what kind of outcome they'll deliver over time.
So whereabouts are these plantations? Just how big are they?
Well, we've got, by the end of this planting season, we'll have 16,000 hectares. So we're growing in size, and we're across pretty much southern Australia. So if you think of the wheat belt from central New South Wales to northern Victoria and all throughout southwestern Western Australia.
Of course, the whole concept of carbon credits and the carbon market, indeed, is a relatively new market on our landscape. How does a company succeed in such an up-and-coming environment that isn't really well established?
Yes, well, fortunately in Australia we've had the New South Wales Greenhouse Gas Abatement Scheme, which is a piece of legislation requiring energy retailers to acquire a certain amount of carbon credits a year. So we've been operating under that scheme for 5 years now. And often large resource companies and as part of their project approval need long-term greenhouse gas offsets. So despite the absence of a national scheme, there's actually regulation and drivers for companies to offset, and also in the voluntary space there's quite big demand as well.
So what kind of organisations and industries would use a service such as yours?
Our bigger clients are Woodside, Inpex, which is developing a major gas project in Western Australia. We've got power companies such as Origin Energy and Eraring Energy, which is a coal-fired power station. We have water companies. We've got Actu in ACT, which is a power and water company, Wannon Water in Victoria, mining companies, Newmont Mining out of Western Australia. So we've got a broad and diverse client base.
Andrew, you mentioned the lack of a national framework. Just how does the uncertainty surrounding the carbon pollution reduction scheme affect a business like yours?
Well, we've been successful. To date, we've entered into $170 million of deals, so in the absence of a scheme. So we're very secure and strong and growing despite that. What a national scheme for us would mean tremendous growth, and that's the opportunity. And business is struggling because it knows it needs to reduce its greenhouse footprint, and what a national scheme would give it would be a long, loud and clear price signal. And the more people and politicians manipulate it and play short-term politics with it, actually makes it harder for business.
So what kind of outcomes would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to see less politics and more focus on what's important, and that is that we've got to modify our business and society at large in terms of reducing our production of greenhouse gases, and the best way to do that is through a market price and a market system.
Yeah, you mentioned before that you're already in quite a lucrative space. I think you recorded a loss in 2006, but have turned that around to $1 million profit now. So you can obviously see further scope to grow even further. How did you turn the loss to the profit?
Well, we took the view when we set the company up, which is almost 6 years ago, that you needed to be of a certain size, and that has a cost associated with it. And we've grown our revenues year in, year out from day one. So 6 years of compound revenue growth, and with a flat cost base. So as we've grown our client base, we've been able to increase our earnings, and now we're in a healthy position.
I'd like to ask you just about yourself personally.
Yeah.
You, of course, were named the winner of the 2009 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award in the clean tech category.
Yes,
just how did you become interested in the whole carbon emissions and carbon credit space? Because you set up the company 6 years ago, and I imagine your thinking went well before that, kind of ahead of the times, weren't you?
11 years, yes, indeed. 11 years ago, I joined what was Arthur Andersen, and then we ended up becoming Ernst & Young. So I set up their environmental consulting practice, and carbon as a risk was a major issue for major corporates, both nationally and internationally. And my practice was around working with companies, helping them understand their emissions profile and strategies to reduce it. So it was a logical extension of that kind of work.
But there wasn't legislative requirements going back then, or were there?
Yeah, well, there were signs that legislation was imminent, and some of the work was offshore, where you've got the European Carbon Scheme and you've got voluntary carbon trading scheme in the United Kingdom. So there was enough evidence that this was going to be a big issue for business.
How do you think Australia places on the global scene when it comes to the whole area of carbon offsets?
Well, we're the leader by some margin. We're very sophisticated in terms of our science and our carbon accounting and the practicalities on how a scheme could manage carbon offsets. So we have much to teach the world. We've got the most advanced systems now, and we've got the most mature industry. We're the largest company in the world of our type.
Okay, well, great to have you in, Andrew Grant. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Do stay with us. Coming up after the break, Spotlight on Solar.